Kate, go ahead.
All right, thank you all for coming tonight. My name's Kate James. I'm in my living room. I'm not at Concord Art, which is just so unusual, but as the newscasters say, these are unusual times. It's delightful to see all your faces, and I want to thank you all so much for tuning in tonight for some storytelling and a Concord Art community toast. We're so grateful for all the ways you've supported us this year. And although I would have loved to have seen you in person, I'm kind of glad I don't have to go out in this winter wonderland tonight. As somebody said earlier, they said, oh, we would have canceled this tonight if it was in person. So there is a silver lining. So I've been musing about what our founder, Elizabeth Wentworth Roberts, might have been doing on a winter's evening in her house on Estabrook Road 100 years ago in Concord, December 17th, 1920. And strangely or coincidentally enough, she lived right next door to me, that direction, right next door. So I think that's pretty amazing. So I often think about her. And I've been a real advocate of using history lately as a medicine. It comforts me to think that we've been through so many of these things before, and we're okay. We got through them. So I do know for certain that she was dreaming about starting an art center in Concord. She had been through a war and a pandemic, and in 1920, women had just been given the vote. She'd probably just voted in her first, presidential election. The times have real parallels to the ones we are in now. And in fact, maybe she and Grace Keyes, who she lived with, were listening to a radio program, a storytelling program. Could have been. The radio came around 1920. So anyway, she had successfully pulled off several exhibitions at the Concord Townhouse and was on the verge of buying 37 Lexington Road, where we are today, an old stately colonial to house her dream of a large exhibition space. She had found her place and her people, her community in Concord, and was about to launch another community, one for art and artists. And yes, because of her vision and her generosity and creativity 100 years ago, we are all here today on Zoom. So please join me in a toast to her and to all the wonderful Concord Art characters from this organization's history, like the Alice Moultons and the Loring Colemans. A lot of you know who those people are. And of course, for tonight's generous sponsors, the Browns, Susan Halby, the Fondrys, Martha Gallagher, the Winstanleys, the Painters, Jeff Wien, and the Roddies. All of you joined us in a show of support in the last 10 days, and we are truly grateful. And to your organizer and our new development guru, Diane, who introduced us all to the wonders of a sort of, she calls it a stone soup fundraising. And she did a great job. It was definitely a stone soup kind of thing. And of course to Sasha and Marissa, our very own technical wizards, and Lisa and Mary, who keep the home fires burning each day. At Concord Art, there's always so many people to thank, which is truly a great thing. With 100 years of community members to toast, both past and present, here, now if you have a glass, here's to each and every one of you. Cheers. Thank you. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our Master of Ceremonies for tonight, Fugitive Productions founder, David Garrett. Thank you so much, David.
Hey, everybody. So as you might guess, this is Fugitive's first outing since the second week of March. We very sadly sort of shut everything down at that time. And frankly, I was very happy to shut everything down early And the reason that I did is because I listened to some very good advice from your last speaker of the night tonight, who is very well versed and in all things COVID. So I thank Robin for that timely descent into lack of events. Tonight we're going to have 6 tellers, 3 who are identified by Concord Art, and 3 who are folks who tell fairly regularly in my series at different locations. And for those of you who haven't been to a storytelling event like this, let me just tell you how it's going to work. The stories tend to be in the range of 5 to 7 minutes, although of course they vary. You know, stories are not always the same every time they're told. So, you know, they'll be in that range. The story has to be something that actually happened to the person who's telling the story. And so it's a personal story. They don't use notes. They don't read it. They're just telling us something that happened. And tonight's theme, as I expect you all know, is community. Though we miss being together in the same room, you know, there's something magical that happens between the performer and the audience. But we hope to bring some of that magic to this special moment. We hope you've grabbed a beverage and a snack and settled down in a comfy chair and are ready to listen to some true stories told live. So let me introduce our first teller of the evening. Our first teller is a painter who lives in Cambridge. She teaches active mixed media and collage classes to adults and likes to make art while listening to music or Pod Save America. She's a Concord Art fan favorite. This is her 4th time sharing a story at a Concord Art fundraiser. Please welcome Alexandra Sheldon.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to cover my face so I don't see myself. All right, well, here I am. I'm going to, instead of a mic, I thought I'd use this paintbrush. So my story is about raising boys and their fights. When my boys were 11 and 14, my husband and I had a really bad idea to leave them alone for the afternoon. Our idea was that we would walk to Harvard Square and see a play and give the boys some money to go to a restaurant around the corner from our house. And, you know, our boys didn't always get along very well, so this was just not a good idea. But we must have really needed a break. So we left the boys, they were playing ball in the backyard, and we walked to Harvard Square and we saw the first half of a play at the ART. And during intermission, I checked my phone and there was a very stern message on my phone. This is Dr. Anderson. We've got your boys at the emergency room at Mount Auburn Hospital. You need to get here right away. So we didn't run, we leapt 9 blocks. I remember just this sort of leaping through the air in full parental panic mode. And when we got to the hospital, we were led into the back of the ER and there was the little room and both our boys were sitting there, 11 and 14. They were sitting there with their legs up on chairs, their ankles crossed, eating chips, cookies, drinking soda, and watching TV, completely uninjured. And I just felt really relieved that they were okay, but I also felt sort of outraged. They had been playing ball in the backyard, and the younger one, Sylvan, had gotten irritated by his older brother and thrown a rock at him, but it didn't hit him. It hit ricocheted off the house, hit our older son, Adrian, in the forehead. Our son, Adrian, is very dramatic and can't bear the sight of blood. He thought he felt blood on his hand when he touched his forehead. He staggered into the house, clutching his head, went past the 3 phone numbers I had written on the big piece of paper on the kitchen counter with like a neighbor who was home and their older sister who lived nearby. And he called 911. And when the police came, they couldn't see any discernible injury on Adrian, but they thought we can't leave these kids alone, so we'll take them to the hospital. And that was when the doctor called us and left that message. Then the doctor tried to find the wound on our son's head, couldn't find it. Then he checked his younger brother, thought maybe he had the wrong kid. But anyway, there was no wound. And we were investigated by DSS for this. So Department of Social Services called, this woman came to our house and asked us questions, but she was more interested in the cats, as I recall. I made her a cup of tea, and after a few questions about our family, she just had more questions about the cats than anything, and that was the end of that. Okay, so fast forward, the boys are now 14 and 17, and they ended up having a fight that ended all fights. We were coming back from Europe. My husband stayed longer in France. We have family in France. We're coming back on the airplane. The boys were absolutely sick of each other, fighting all the time. They were fighting in the plane. They were fighting in the layover in London. And then at baggage claim at Logan Airport, they started sparring. So I kind of think of that as one of my worst parental moments of my life. Like in Logan Airport, stayed up all night on an airplane. It's 8:45 in the morning in January, and I have two out of control sons that will not stop fighting, wrestling, and now sparring. Unfortunately, the day deteriorated. That a few hours later, we're in our house. I walked into my kitchen and they were once again wrestling, completely out of control. And then Adrian bent Sylvan's arm back in like one of those really horrible arm things. And Sylvan was leaning over and coughing and choking. And I thought I saw something red on the floor, and it turned out to be red cabbage, but I thought it was blood. And I just, very calmly, I just went, that's it, that's it. And I walked over to the phone and I dialed 911. And the boys stopped fighting. And I don't remember what I said to the police, but it was probably something like, I can't control my teenage sons. They're fighting. Please come get them. But if you can't come get them, come get me. Just as long, either option is fine with me. Just either you take them or you take me. I just can't do this anymore. Adrian grabbed his coat, ran out of the house. The police show up and talked to Sylvan and I in the living room. And I think they just saw a really exhausted mother. And they only stayed for a few minutes. And Sylvan was texting his brother saying, keep hiding. Adrian was hiding in the cemetery. So the police leave. We were very lucky. Nothing ever came of it. There was no police report. That was really fortunate. So about an hour later, Adrian comes back through the back door, walks into the kitchen. I'm standing by the refrigerator, and he says, Mom, you could have completely screwed up my life. You could have, I could have a record. I mean, that could have really messed me up. And he made a fist, and he punched the wall next to the refrigerator. Later, he said he estimated exactly where the stud was in the wall, but he miscalculated because he hit the hardest part of that wall. And when he looked down at his hand, and I looked down at his hand, it was really badly broken. It didn't even look like his hand. It was really a mess. And he started screaming. Sylvan ran into the kitchen, looked at Adrian's hand, started screaming, and then this dam broke in me, and I started screaming. The three of us are standing around looking at Adrian's broken hand, just wailing. And then I did what any normal 48-year-old mother does. I called my older sister, and I just started sobbing. And she said, you pull yourself together, Alexandra. You get those boys into the car, you get to the hospital, go to Mount Auburn, call me when you get there. So I just had to do what my older sister told me to do. So I did that. I got them there, and they bandaged his hand, and they gave him x-rays, and they gave him painkillers, and they made an appointment for the very next morning to see a hand specialist. And the next morning we went in, and the hand specialist said to me, do you know that 80% of the boys and men that come through my door have punched a wall? And I said, well, what about the girls and the women? And he said, cat scratches. And that's my story. Thank you.
There we go. Got to remember to unmute myself. That was great. Thank you. Our next teller lives in Acton and is director of the Fitchburg Art Museum, a community-oriented museum in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, with art historical collections, changing exhibitions of regional contemporary art, and educational and community economic development programs. Prior to Fitchburg, he served as curator at the deCordova Sculpture Park for 22 years. He's also worked extensively with public art in Boston with the Urban Arts Institute, Now and There, and the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. But in our home, he is famous for being married to Andrea Southwick, who mentored my son for many summers where they worked together in a theater program. So I am thrilled to welcome Nick Capasso.
Thank you, David. and Alexandra, thank you for your story. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. So my story is more about art and community. About 8 years ago, I left my job at the deCordova Museum, where I had been a curator for a very, very long time. And I left to become the director of the Fitchburg Art Museum. And I made this change for a lot of different reasons. But two of the things that intrigued me about Fitchburg is that this museum wanted to better serve the community. And it was also interested in getting involved in public art, which is something that I've been very interested in for my entire career. So when I arrived at Fitchburg, no sooner did I get there that I found out that the museum had been awarded a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to support multiple public art projects in Fitchburg. I said, okay, this is great. So this is one of the first things I had to deal with. And we started right away, and our first project was with an artist named Nora Valdez, and she created on Main Street in Fitchburg a monument to the successive waves of immigrants who have shaped that city. And we also worked with a muralist, Caleb Nealon, who created a large mural on Main Street. Now, these are fairly traditional forms of public art. One's a granite sculpture, the other one's a mural. They were both community related and informed in various ways. And then we decided to work with an artist named Anna Schuleit-Haber, and we totally jumped off the deep end. Anna, we knew Anna because she had made a name for herself as a kind of out-of-the-box thinker about public art. She found out that in Boston, there was a psychiatric hospital that had been there for over 100 years, and they were going to tear it down. And Anna found out that because of the rules of the hospital, that the patients in the hospital were never allowed to have flowers. So she created this project where she filled thousands of square feet of this abandoned building with blooming flowers just before it was torn down, as a monument to all the people who had been there who could never have flowers. And then all the flowers were donated to psychiatric hospitals and other places. And by virtue of this and some other large, very different public art projects, Anna was fortunate enough to be awarded a MacArthur Fellowship. So we invited Anna to Fitchburg. I told her we had this grant to do public art, and she said, well, before I come up with a proposal, I want to spend some time in Fitchburg and figure this place out a little bit. So Anna poked around the city for a few days, And then we had a meeting and, you know, we said to her, okay, Anna, what do you think? What do you want to do? And she said, I want to take over your local newspaper. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Oh my God. So we have we have a newspaper in Fitchburg, the Sentinel and Enterprise. It's a daily paper. It's one of the longest continually published papers in the United States. They've been publishing since I think I've got this right, the 1830s. And Anna was intrigued by the fact that, you know, a down on its heels town like Fitchburg still had a daily paper. And she was also intrigued by the newspaper as a dying medium. You know, all the newspapers are going online. Even the Sentinel and Enterprise is going online. And she wanted to see what she could do to bring some creativity to bear on a medium that was, you know, enjoying its last gasps of relevancy. And I said, all right, Anna, you want to take over the paper? What do you want to do with it? And she says, well, I want to create a new alphabet. Okay. So Anna's idea was that she wanted to create a special alphabet for Fitchburg and reveal it on the front page of the paper for 26 consecutive days. And this alphabet was to be, you know, each day would be devoted to a different letter. The first day would be A, and the second day would be B, and so on. And it would be comprised of a couple of things. It would be some artwork and also stories that keyed to the letter of the day. And I'll tell you more about this in a minute. So, you know, I thought, well, we've got a pretty good relationship with the public, or the editor of the paper, a guy named Charlie Saint Amand, to whom I will be forever grateful. And I thought, well, this is crazy, and this is impossible, and he's never going to let us do this. But, you know, let's go pitch the idea to him, because at least he will say no to her and I won't have to. You know, we hired her to come up with this crazy idea, and she came up with a crazy one and a really good one. So we went to see Charlie. Charlie thought it was a great idea, and he was totally behind it. You know, he was a very creative editor who wanted to do different things with the paper. And then the next step was to pitch this to the publisher. And at the time, the Sentinel was owned, I don't remember what conglomerate owned it, but it owned a bunch of papers, including the Sentinel and Enterprise. So we set up a meeting with the publisher. And on the day of the meeting, I was late to the meeting. Something happened at the museum. I don't remember what. I was going to be late. I texted them. It was fine. I said, Anna, you just get started. So I go over to the newspaper office. I let myself into the room. There's this big table of men in suits, publishers, attorneys, God knows who else. And I make my way to my seat, and I realized right then and there that we were going to do this. Because, you know, I barged into the room. No one even looked up. No one looked at me. They were riveted by Anna, who's a force of nature, and her idea. And they approved it somehow. And not only did they let her take over the front page of their paper for 26 days, they gave her an office in the press room. They gave her permission to go on press in the middle of the night in Lowell, in the factory where they print the paper, to make sure that the artwork was right. They went for this hook, line, and sinker. And this was a miracle as far as I was concerned. And so this is what the Alphabet Project turned out to be. So, okay, 26 front pages, consecutive days. This was done in July of 2015. So what you'd see on the paper every day was a big letter, A, B, C, whatever. And each letter was created by a different letterpress or typescript artist whom Anna had contacted all around the world. And there was a different letter and a different style for every day. And then the stories in the paper were all keyed to that day's letter. And so on letter A day, there were stories not about what you'd usually find on the front page of a local paper, you know, accidents and ambulances and arson and God knows what else. It was things that were relevant to our local community, things like like acorns and artists and Johnny Appleseed, who comes from Leominster, Massachusetts. And all of these articles were written by people in the community, by students at Fitchburg State University, by students at the high school, by kids at the Boys and Girls Club, that Anna had somehow corralled to do all this work. And then, because she was a MacArthur Fellow, she got all her MacArthur Fellow buddies who were letterpress or typescript artists to create letters. And she found all the MacArthur Fellow writers who grew up in North Central Massachusetts to contribute articles. So she was connecting the community with Fitchburg with the whole world at this point. It was just unbelievable. And this went on for 26 days. And artwork, public art, was appearing on the doorsteps of thousands of people every day. I remember one day I went into a convenience store because I would go in and buy extra copies for the museum. And I went in and I grabbed a few copies, and the clerk said, "Are you collecting those?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am." And he said, "Well," he said, "all of my customers are collecting them, so you can only have one." Well, my one, and I went home. And the newspaper really made out that they won awards for 2 years for this project, because something like this had never been done before. So it had a huge impact, and it made a community feel really proud of itself. And, you know, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've worked with a lot of interesting people and done a lot of interesting and sometimes very strange projects. But there is no project that I'm more proud of having worked with than bringing a new alphabet to Fitchburg. And that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fabulous. I'm a graphic designer, so that story for me, you know, I work with alphabets all day long, every day. I am fascinated by that. I started working in hot type as a teenager, handling letters physically. And so I thank you so much. I love that story. Okay, time for another teller. Our next teller organizes exhibitions of contemporary art and facilitates conversations between artists and publics. He has worked at the ICA in Boston and the Getty, and is currently the Curatorial Fellow at deCordova Sculpture Park and Museum in Lincoln. Please welcome a man with a very memorable name, Sam Adams.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction. I just wanted to mention that when I told some of our volunteer guides at deCordova that I was going to be on this event with Nick Capasso, who hasn't worked at the museum for some years now, one person started touching themselves just sort of gently and said, "Oh, Nick, the most amazing storyteller, you know, he used to have that ponytail." And the whole guide corps was doing the same thing. And I was like, geez, what a lineup to be on. And then I went to the videos from previous years and I saw Alexandra's story, which made me cry. And I have no idea why you asked me to be with these two people, but thanks for inviting me. And thank you for the long friendship between deCordova and Concord Art. So given that we are in a nor'easter, I will talk about my love affair with Los Angeles, which is flaring up right now. I went to live in Los Angeles for 4 years to do graduate work, and at the University of Southern California in art history, I arrived and my friend's mother's boyfriend drove me around the city to find an apartment. This was 2009, so everyone was fun and employed and broke. And we were driving around West Hollywood, which was sort of between my job at the Getty and my university downtown. And Frank, our driver, stopped and he said, "This is your building, Sam. This is the party building." And I looked out and it's this 1920s old Hollywood stucco building, terracotta, tiled roof, there were a lot of shirtless, very muscular men just hanging out outside under palm trees. I don't know if someone was paying them to do that or they just did that. People were hanging out in their windowsills, on the balconies, had a distinct bohemian vibe. And I was like, I don't want the party building. I want Faust's study. I want like a hermetic little, cave to dissertate in. But I met the building manager, Jerry. He had a crush on me. He dropped the price down to $800 a month for this little corner unit with an avocado tree right outside of it. And that was that. So that was the studio apartment. And the building was called the Casa Real. It had been built in the 1920s as the servants' quarters for the Chateau Marmont next door, which is a sort of celebrity hotel modeled on a chateau in the Loire Valley. And it was sweet time. So I was a little bit of a hermit. I really didn't jump into community outside my immediate sort of academic museum bubble, and also had decided not to date anyone until I finished my dissertation. Whatever, I fell in love and met my now husband at the time. That plan luckily fell through. But Moises, my husband, was living in Boston and came to visit almost every month. And it was just like a very sweet moment. I would get home from work and Moises had found his way into some boutique hotel's pool, and I would go over and find him, Skyping in 7 different languages and drinking a San Pellegrino, which was his trick, is that you never order anything more expensive than sparkling water and they never ask for your room. So we were just hanging out poolside. I got home one day and he said, we're going to a party. We had to dress up. We dressed up as ketchup and mustard. We got into this huge SUV that came to pick us up. He met like a fashion designer who lived in my building. I had lived there for years and wasn't fabulous enough to have made its acquaintance, and he did it in a day. But anyhow, we got picked up. We go up to the Hollywood Hills, and we were in line at the buffet, and my husband, who's a pianist, is standing next to me and is talking to Adrian Brody, who is the pianist, and they end up actually having a discussion about ketchup, totally unrelated to the fact that I was actually dressed as a bottle of ketchup, literally just talking. Anyway, so as I was in Los Angeles, I was trying to keep up my viola playing, and I joined a quartet at USC, which has a terrific string program. And I was walking out of my building one day to rehearsal, and these hippies on my stoop were jamming. They were playing guitar, and they said, you have to come make music with us. And I just want to qualify when I say hippies. They were topless, barefoot. They had, sort of loose knit garments around their waists and headbands. I feel like they deserve that, won that title. And so I went by, we started playing together, and we started gigging. So we were playing at like bars up and down the Sunset Strip where we lived. And it was fun. It was okay. I mean, I was playing viola. It was a little random. But I got poached after one gig. There was this punk bluegrass band that was phenomenal that played after us. They rocked everyone's socks off. Everyone was dancing and moving. It was fantastic. They were like 2 banjos, mandolin, guitar, bass, harmonica, super angry lead singer. It was just like really great. They had clearly lived and practiced together for a really long time. So they slipped me they were missing a fiddle. So they slipped me their business card. They said, we rehearse twice a week, come find us. So I did. I wasn't that into the old band, I have to say, even though we had experienced mild success. We changed our name they changed our name every single week, our last name. Anyway, so I went to this other group, and there was something immediately just strange and disarming about being in this. Their rehearsal site was a garage that belonged to someone who is a substance abuse counselor in a prison, and maintained relationships with a lot of his patients after post-incarceration, and they would just come out and hang out in the garage and like be rebuilding cars or something. So we would be playing our angry bluegrass music, and they would be like the peanut gallery, like critiquing like the songs as we were writing them, or just like cheering us on. So that night I took out my viola, and we opened up some beers and we started playing, and I have never had any musical experience like this before. We got closer and closer together. I know I can't really say that during COVID. It's like the worst thing to describe, but we got closer and closer together until by the end of the night, we were just like inches from each other's faces. They were playing through this set that they, played all the time together. But I was watching the mandolin's fingers and I could anticipate what he was going to play next. And it was like, this, these sparks were flying. It's so cliche and gross, but I will just say it was like sex. It was like sex. And I cannot say that about playing Brahms string quartet with the USC group. I just that parallel never popped into my mind. So it was amazing, and we made an album together. We made a music video. We toured up and down California. We had a standing gig every week. We played in a bar downtown at Skid Row. Kyo is the intersection of Skid Row and Little Tokyo. And we were paid in beer and donut burgers, so a donut sliced in half with burger in between. So I almost vomited before every single show. My art history cohort and Getty colleagues had come one time to hear us play there. They did not try the donut burger. No judgment. So anyhow, I'll just conclude by saying I came that I have had so few straight male friends in my life that this was in a lot of ways my first experience of brotherhood in that sense. And like when I moved out of LA, they helped me pack and sell my stuff. And our band manager, whose only other job was like being paid to sample soft drinks and chip flavors, drove my car across country for me when I was moving out of the country. And so 2 years later, when I came back to LA to defend my dissertation, I borrowed a friend's car and I drove out to Atwater Village to go see to the garage. And they all looked the same, which made me a little sad, and I guess in some way they had put on some weight. You eat enough donut burgers and that'll happen. And someone was there who was explaining that when he was in prison, someone had just written this incredible song, totally amazing lyrics, and shared it with us and said that the person actually had died. And it was a totally unknown song. No one had ever heard it. So basically he was giving us this amazing song to pass off as our own. And in their normal sort of dark humor way, they were musing about the ethical implications of stealing a dead person's song. And they joked, "Sam, oh my God, don't judge us. You came back to visit us and here we are so desperate that we're stealing dead people's music." And I just thought, wow, no, actually it's totally the opposite. Like this group of people, this sort of kin, actually demonstrated total radical non-judgment to me. I grew up around wealthy and entitled people, and they were neither of those things. And there were, I arrived in LA with this sense of ambition and rigor and this sort of like competitiveness. And so I'm just so grateful for that experience. The band is now like a state of mind that I actually tap into quite often, sort of introduced me to some mellowness that I didn't realize was inside of me. Thank you.
That was lovely. And I think, I imagine that many of us are sharing our missing of live music. I know I am terribly. So thank you for your story. It was lovely. Our next teller is a comedic storyteller and producer for The Moth. Her work has been featured on CBS Sunday Morning, National Public Radio, and HBO's Inspiration Room. When she's not telling stories, she is parenting her teenage sons who would prefer that she stop talking about them on stage. There's no stage tonight, so please welcome Susanne Schmidt.
Thanks so much, David. Oh my gosh, Sam, wow. I will be thinking about that story for days and days and days. Thank you so much for that. Such fabulous stories. Thank you for having me. So my best and worst community were actually the same community. And yes, you are correct. It was the middle school band. So I became a drummer in 6th grade, which in the 70s was not a popular thing for a girl to be. The boys were not happy about this. But in truth, I worked really hard. And so by 7th grade, when our music teacher made me the first chair, the boys were fine with it because they were just really not interested in putting in the kind of work that they knew I was going to put in. And so at our first chair meeting, I will remember Mr. Stent standing in front of us and saying, the most important thing in this role is that you have to make sure that you are the glue that will hold your section together when something goes wrong. And then he kind of just looked off wistfully and said, and something always goes wrong, like as if it was not connected to him as a conductor in any way, that something bad was just going to happen. Mr. Stentz was cool. I loved him. And in truth, most middle school band teachers will tell you it's not sort of where they hope to be. It's not really a destination. It's kind of just a rest stop on the way. It's a paying gig. But in spite of that, Mr. Stentz couldn't hide that he knew that music had the power to transform us in ways that art really can do. I can still picture him. He would wear blue jeans and crisp white shirts and a suede jacket with little patches on the elbows. He carried a man purse well before it was ever really popular. And he would stand in front of us and wave his baton, and his baton was like just an extension of this beautifully tanned sort of muscular arm. And he had this one motion that was very specific to middle school band teachers, which is sort of this motion, which meant keep going, keep going. He did that a lot, as did a lot of middle school band teachers. So as it turns out, two of my friends were also first chairs. And so me and Patty Napolitano and Tammy Seegers were all first chairs in a way that there had never been this many girls in the band. We were excited. We knew that we were going to make this happen. And the first few rehearsals were incredible and things were going really well. And then Joey Hagzan joined the band. Now, he didn't actually join the band. It was more like a condition of his release. Joey was the consummate school bully. And he decided a couple of weeks into school that he was going to light a roll of toilet paper on fire in the boys' bathroom. And then in an effort to put it out, he tried to flush it down the toilet. And so as the fire alarm started to go off, the bathroom also started to flood. And so as we're being evacuated, he decided just to kind of put the icing on the cake, he would stop in the secretary's office and say, I think I might have saw a bomb in the bathroom. And so in this one trifecta at the Ralph J. Osgood Middle School, Joey had created a fire alarm, a bomb scare, and a flood in one singular event. And so his parents were given a couple of choices. He could be expelled from school, or he could join the band. I'm still not clear what Mr. Stentz owed to the principal in order to give this favor back to him, but Joey joined the band. And not only did he join the band, he joined the band as a tuba player, which nothing sucks the cool out of a bully like having to play the tuba in the middle school band. And so pretty much from day one, this was not really a punishment for Joey, it was really a punishment for us. Patty Napolitano really took the brunt of it because she was the head of the horn section. And he would fart and burp almost as accent notes during pretty much every piece. He would, at one point, he opened up the head of the timpani and put a dead fish in there. So it was many, many days before we could really figure out where the smell had come from. But a couple of weeks in, at a first chair meeting, we said to Mr. Stentz, like, this isn't working. You've got to get rid of him. You've got to kick him out of the band. And Mr. Stentz just looked at us and he thought about it for a few minutes and he said, you know what? There's always going to be bullies. You're just going to have to learn how to deal with this. And I can remember just feeling incredibly disappointed. I loved this man. I thought he was a mentor. He was one of the coolest people we knew. And he had just pretty much brushed us off. And so we just kept going. And months went by, and it came time for the winter concert. And Mr. Stentz decided that he was going to do something that no middle school band teacher should ever try to do, which was he was going to bring together the band and the chorus for the finale of the winter concert. And so for the 12 days of Christmas, the band and chorus would join together on stage. This was an impossible feat. Even if you could get through all of the days, sticking the landing was just never going to happen. And so we gather together. It's the night of the concert. The PTA decides they're going to feed us before the concert, which was a really, really nice gesture that none of us really understood how badly this could turn out. And so I watch as David Stuckedy eats so many candy canes that his fingers start to stick to the pads of his oboe. And so by the time we take the stage, he can really only play a B flat note. And then I also watched Joey Hagzan eat more pigs in blankets and cheese doodles than I ever thought humanly possible. But there it is. Now we take the stage, the chorus is done, the band gets settled. There's probably 60 teenagers on stage at once. And I look up at Mr. Stentz, and I think that's the moment he realizes this is going to go so horribly wrong. And we start. And the first few days of the 12 days of Christmas actually go really well. And just at the point where I'm thinking, this is going to be okay, Joey Hagzan leans over and looks right at Patty Napolitano and just lets out the largest burp you'd ever heard. I mean, this thing just resonated all through the band, and you could start to smell it. It had that kind of funky smell to it. And so, of course, kids start to laugh, and so he does it again, and he does it again. And then on the 5th day of Christmas, Joey Hagzan turns, and right into the bell of Patty Napolitano's French horn, he lets out this mixture of cheese doodle and pig in blanket vomit that just projectiles right into the bell of her horn. And the drum line, who has the best view of this thing because we're standing behind them, I just freak out and I stop. And when I stop, the whole drum line stops. And when the drum line stops, the horn section stops. And when the horn section stops, the saxophone stops. And now the only thing you can hear is like David Stuckedy's one B flat note. And I look up at Mr. Stentz and just beads of sweat are dripping off of him. And it's like every little droplet that hits the floor, it's like another year of musical education just splashing and crashing before our eyes. And he looks at me with this desperation, like, please keep going. And so I know what I need to do. And I remember what he said that day. And so I look at my line and I start to play. And when I start to play, the rest of the drummers start to play. And when the drum section starts, slowly the trumpets start and slowly the saxophones start. And then everybody pretty much is playing, except for Joey and Patty. And then in this moment, an act of braveness that I don't think I had ever seen before and the likes of which I have never seen since, Patty Napolitano, with 2 fingers, grabs the bell of her French horn and she dips out as much vomit as she can, and she starts to blow. And with every breath that she pushes through that horn, shards of vomit just come barreling out of the end of her horn all over Joey Hagzan's white shirt. And he's just covered in this like orangey vomit. And in that moment, it is a Christmas miracle. And we take back the band. It was something that needed to happen, and Mr. Stentz understood that it was something that needed to happen that we needed to do. Joey quit the band like a week later, and Patty Napolitano years later became the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
And Joey Hagzan actually found Jesus, as it turns out, in the place that most people find him, at the Dannemora State Correctional Facility. And Mr. Stentz was absolutely right. Music, this community of music, has the power to transform us. And bullies will always be there. And sometimes they will vomit in your direction. But if we stick together and we stay strong, we can blow that shit right back. Thank you.
Oh my God, that was fabulous. I expect that other people were laughing out loud because I know I was. It reminds me very briefly of, in high school, I played in a ragtime band, and we had a tuba player in that band. And I just discovered by chance that that tuba player is now the head of the editorial board at the Washington Post. So I just reached out to him, and looking forward to that. So, you know, our early music experiences, you never know where they're going to lead. Our next teller is a storyteller, composer, musician, children's author, and actor. He has performed as a storyteller at festivals, schools, and libraries across the country. As a musician and composer, he has shared the stage with Taj Mahal, Gil Scott-Heron, and Taylor. He's written and performed original compositions for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and WGBH Public Television. He's been a featured storyteller at WGBH, and in 2016 brought his children's Stories on the Wind to Fugitive Productions. But he may be known best for his 30+ years as an educator of kindergartners and first graders in Newton. Please welcome Kemp Harris.
Thank you so much, David. Also, just so you know, David and I have the same birthday, so we're like, you know, like this. When I was thinking about community, I thought back to 1978, when my then partner, now husband, and I bought our house on Pearl Street in Central Square. I still call it Central Square. Now you see signs that say Cambridge Port, but it's, to me, Central Square. Because in 1978, it was not the gentrified, cute neighborhood that it is right now. There were so many characters who wandered up and down Pearl Street from Central Square. There was a host of alcoholic men, substance abuse. I think there was some kind of a clinic down the street. There was a shelter someplace. And right in front of our house was like a straight shot for this salvation for all these people. There was a woman who, her name was Dottie. She ran the laundromat, and there was another woman who would sweep trash every week, and she'd sweep all the trash from the street right into down the sewer. There was the people who owned the Brookline Lunch that I got to know very well. But I was kind of into this, not shining like Harvard Square and Davis Square kind of community. I was into it. So there would be guys, I'd come home from work, there would be like 3 or 4 guys sitting on the stairs, completely drunk. And they would say, look, do you mind if we just, sit here for a little bit while we, make our way down? I was like, absolutely not. You guys feel free. And it was really kind of cool because they would watch the house. I came back one day, I had friends who were going to stay with us. And I'd given them keys, and I'd come home from work, and one of the guys said, yeah, around 12:30 today, a couple of guys showed up, went right into your house. Do you know who they are? It was like, I do. They're good. Oh, okay. So it was a really nice symbiotic kind of thing. I remember one morning, on a Sunday morning, I looked in the backyard, and there was a guy asleep in our hammock. Now, my partner, my husband, Bill, he was not like me. He was not into this, it's like, so I look out in the backyard and I see this guy, passed out in the hammock, and I go down into the backyard and I gently shake him. I said, hey, hi, I live here, and I'm just wondering, how long do you think you might need, before you pull yourself together? Because there's another guy who lives here who is not into this. So he said, I think I'll be good in about 40 minutes. I was like, that's awesome. No problem. Okay, so I go back upstairs. I'm like, Bill, listen, there's a guy asleep in the hammock. He just needs about 40 minutes or so to pull it together. So this is the neighborhood where I lived. And I had gotten so used to just all of these colorful characters who wandered in and around from Central Square down Pearl Street. Across the street from our house was Rocco's Sandwich Shop. I could open my window and yell out in the morning what I wanted for breakfast just through the screen, and he would make it and I'd pick it up. This is the kind of neighborhood, the kind of community that we had. So I was completely comfortable in our neighborhood. And there was this one woman who I would see all the time. And I never knew her name. We never really talked about anything in particular, but I would see her all the time. There's a little market called the Pearl Street Market right on the corner. And I would always see her, walking up and down Pearl Street. And she would always give me a tentative smile and just sort of nod, and I would give her a tentative smile and nod back, and we would say a quiet hello. And that's the most that we ever did. It was just another person on Pearl Street that I had gotten used to and had come to sort of see for a good long time. And one day, it was around, I don't know, evening, just before dusk, and I walk outside and I see her, and she is completely distraught. She's outside the store. She's leaning against the wall of the store, and she's crying. She is unconsolable. And I'm thinking, okay, I know I do my reach out, but do you want to get, sort of involved? And I thought, yes, you do. This is what I do in my neighborhood. This is who I am. And so I walked up and I said, are you okay? And she said, no, I'm not. I don't feel well. I don't know. And as I got closer, I could see that she was completely inebriated. She was completely drunk, and I'd never seen her this way before. So I was very concerned, and I said, well, is there anything that I can do to help you? And she was still just, unconsolable. And she said, I don't have a way to get home. I don't know how I'm going to get home. And I'm thinking, okay, if Bill were here right now, he would say to me, you should turn, walk your butt back home, close your door, and be done. But that's not what I did. And I said to her, well, is there anyone that I can call for you? Is there anyone that I can call, your family, to help you? And so she managed to get out from me that she had a son, and her son, lived nearby. And she, where they lived, I think she lived with him. I didn't get the entire story, but she said she had her son. And I said, well, if you give me his phone number, I will call him for you, and sort of let him know what's going on. So she gives me his phone number, and I take out my cell phone. This is probably around 1982-ish, 83. I know because I still had my silver EMS Saab Sports coupe that I got when I graduated college. And I took out my cell phone and I dialed the number, and this voice says, hello. And I said, hi, my name is Kemp Harris. You don't know me, but I live on Pearl Street, and I'm here with your mom, and she is really not doing very well. I think she really needs to have, some help in getting back home. And she gave me your number. So I just want to give you a call and let you know that, I'm here with her. She's here on Pearl Street at the Pearl Street Market. If you could come, to get her. And there's a pause. And then this man went into a tirade. And he said, I'm not even going to use the words that he was saying, but a lot of expletives, but he said, you know what? I'm not coming to get that. I've had it with her. She does this all the time. I'm not coming. Forget about it. I'm done. Forget about it. Hangs up the phone. I look over and there she is, and her eyes are so like, well, did you reach him? And I said, yes, he is not able to come to pick you up right now. But if you, can you tell me where you live? I will give you a ride home. And she says, she manages to get out, and she says, I live, there's the housing development down on Main Street between Central Square and Kendall Square, up near where Bertucci's is now. She says, I live there. And I says, I know where that is. I said, I tell you what, let me get my car and I'll give you a ride home. So I go back and I get my car, I pull up to Pearl, and she gets in. We turn down Watson Street. And as we're heading down, I see her kind of, there's that look like, I'm thinking, you are not going to throw up in my silver EMS sports Saabs. So I pull over. I said, it's okay. I open the door. I said, just lean out. And I'm kind of helping her. She leans out and she does whatever she's going to do. And we, it's like, okay, here's a napkin. I'm thinking I should have listened to Bill, but we pull it together, and I drive her, we go down Brookline, across Mass Avenue, up Main Street, and we get out near where the housing complex is. And she says, yes, this is good. I can get out here. And I said, are you sure you're going to be okay? If you want, I could walk you. She said, no, I'm fine. It's fine. My son is there. It's I can make it work out. And so she gets out and she leaves. And she goes into the walkways into this housing development, and I assume she makes it home. I don't see her for a little bit, but about maybe a week and a half later, I'm walking out of my house to go down to the store, and I see her, and she's walking, and she's the person that I had always seen. She's this lovely middle-aged woman, and she looks at me, and for a brief moment, I thought I recognized that little glint that said, I know who you are. And then she caught herself, and she gave me her very polite smile that she always gave me, and she gave me the very polite nod of, you are on Pearl Street and I am on Pearl Street. And I did the same thing. I did not mention, are you okay? The last time I saw you, I thought, we don't need to do that. Clearly you don't want to do that. And so I gave her a polite nod, and she did the same, and that was that. As the years went by, I just saw her less and less, and I don't know if she moved. I don't know, what happened, but I will always remember that day, and just that exchange that we had in this community of folks on Pearl Street. And down the street from my house, on the parking garage near the Cambridge Public Library, there was a mural I was thinking when Nick was talking about, you know, public art and murals, and there was a mural there and it had like lots of people that you saw in the neighborhood. Dottie was there from the laundromat. The woman who swept all of her trash into the sewer was there. There was a guy, I think from Hi-Fi Pizza, which is no longer there. I think it's Clover restaurant now or something. But there are all these people that I saw that I knew from my neighborhood. And there was one woman in the corner, and I thought she looks like that woman that I helped that day, but I wasn't sure. Recently, they took that mural down of all of those faces, all of those characters that I had seen wandering up and down Pearl Street for so many years. And it's been replaced by a lovely graphic of open books and doves flying out of the book and things like read and affirmations of hope and peace. And I think it's a lovely mural, but to this day, I miss that mural and I miss seeing those faces and I miss all of those characters that I used to know on Pearl Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Kemp. I mentioned this to you when you told me you were going to tell me the story, but I spent my youth racing my bicycle down Pearl Street because I lived in Brookline, but I knew all the action was in Cambridge. And it just makes me think, and of course, it was just a street that I rode my bike down. And it just makes me think that, you know, the richness that exists in all the communities and all the streets that, you know, the stories that we're not hearing. But that was fabulous. Thank you. Our final teller of the night is Boston's 2019 Moth Grand Slam champion and has told stories in a number of venues. She's an award-winning essayist, particularly in the area of medical memoir. She's been working as a cancer doc for MGH for 28 years, much of that at Emerson Hospital in its Department of Radiation Oncology, where she has been the director of medical education. For most of 2020, she's been writing weekly essays on COVID, and her science-based, guidance-giving, humanity-promoting pieces are read by tens of thousands of people around the country and the world. And as I said, she acted as a fabulous guide for me. I really recommend that you find her. Please welcome Robin Schoenteller.
Thank you for that super nice intro. Just fixing the settings. So yes, I'm going to talk about those essays that I've been writing starting in early March. You guys probably all remember that the Commonwealth shut down Massachusetts on March 13th, and I remember it extremely well because I had already started sending out emails like to David and telling people to stop, that life was about to change in a big way. And I particularly remember the night of March 6th. It was a Friday night, and I had read a terrible email from an Italian doctor who was in the weeds with COVID. And I realized that I was going to need all my coping skills for a long time. So I pulled out one of my big ones, which was that I poured myself a giant glass of red wine. And I banged out a post on Facebook to my local friends and family saying that a catastrophe was en route and that older people should start staying home and everybody should bookmark the CDC. Some people asked some medical questions, so I sent out a post that weekend, and then that was more sciencey, and I skipped the line. But I got more questions, so the next weekend I sent out another and another, and now I've sent out like, I don't know, 40 or 45 every week writing about COVID, and friends sharing them and people following me, and now they've gone viral. And it's like he said, they're read tens of thousands of times. And I know this because I hear from the readers. I've heard from monks in France and nuns in Arkansas and homeowners associations in Greeley, Colorado, who wanted to put it in their newsletter. And then people send me private messages asking for advice on how to be science-based safe. So like a woman in Wyoming wrote me early on about how to stay safe around her 12-year-old granddaughter who she's raising because her daughter's, the mother is in jail because of heroin. And it's winter, it's in Wyoming or Wisconsin, whatever, and they only have a one-room apartment. And another woman wrote me from Duke Cancer Center asking how she should transport her brother to the hospice he wanted to die in New Orleans. And a guy in a town really near Concord wrote me to say in September that he hadn't been out of his yard since March, and was it okay to take a walk? I couldn't write fast enough. Yes, yes, please go take a walk. Sometimes talking to these people feels like Eleanor Rigby, you know, all these lonely people. But most of the time I'm incredibly struck by the community that's been built up by these Facebook posts, where people feel free to comment and talk about their experience and ask for help and strive to keep themselves and their families and their loved ones safe. So I spent a lot of November talking about how to stay safe during holiday gatherings. I kind of preached about, you know, keeping it science-based, that the only way to stay safe was to base it on science. When it came to my own Thanksgiving, that felt pretty simple because I have a small family and they're local. I have 2 young adult sons who live in the Boston area, and they both have really good COVID hygiene. You know, that's what I call it, even though it sounds like a feminine protection product. But they're good about it. They're very responsible. And for the last couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, they really whittled it down to just their smallest friend pod of roommates and girlfriends, and that's it. And occasionally they'd go to a grocery store or CVS, but they were really very much mostly bubbled. So we figured we could have a very safe Thanksgiving. And the way that we ran it was perfect. You know, it was based on all my Facebook essays, right? We kept it small, we kept it short, we didn't cook together, we cooked separately. We sat widely separated at this dining room table. The 2 boys were like 10 feet apart. I was in the adjacent kitchen, which I realize makes me sound like I was in the maid's scullery, but you know, it's open concept. So we were together, but I was like 15 feet away from them. And we had the windows open because it rained that day. Remember, it was nice. And we had the fans on, and it really felt very safe. And we stayed masked, of course, the whole time in the house, but also even at the table, even between servings, we'd pull our masks up. And we really only had our masks down when we were, you know, basically putting a fork in our mouth full of pumpkin pie. So at the end of the night, I really felt very good about it. Thursday night, slept well. Friday was great. Saturday morning, my oldest son, to make a long, agonizing story shorter, turned out to have COVID, which meant that he was contagious at our Thanksgiving dinner. I found out about it the way that we all find out about things from our young adult children. He texted me. It was actually a series of 2 texts. By the time I got the second text, I was bent over, ready to throw up, just so full of regret that I had held this Thanksgiving that I didn't need to hold, and that I hadn't completely followed the science, and now we had a catastrophe that was coming towards us of unimaginable consequence. And that I had absolutely no control over what was going to happen next to him or to his brother or to me. No control. I think it must be the worst possible feeling a parent can have, is that they don't have any control over what's going to happen to their kids. Because this is, in fact, exactly the way that COVID spreads, as we all know. You can be completely asymptomatic and sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner, and then a couple days later, you're infected, and prior to that, you've been infectious. So as it turned out, we've actually never figured out how Kenzie got it. He really was very good with his little friend pod. And they all, by coincidence, had been tested before, the week before, because they were traveling, and they were all negative and they never got sick. So he didn't get it from his friends. He'd gone to a couple of grocery stores and a CVS very safely. So we have no idea, which is probably the scariest thing of all. But as it turned out, Kenzie completely recovered after a rough week. And miraculously, neither Cooper nor I got it. We both ended up negative, repeated tests, and asymptomatic. So the science did protect us from the physical, although the emotional, the disruption, the having to go into quarantine, the anxiety over the tests was not something that I would want anybody to go through. I'm a big believer in life lessons and learning from one's mistakes. And it drove my kids crazy when I was raising them, because I was always, oh, here's another life lesson. But what it meant is that I immediately wrote about it on Facebook, about what had happened to my family. And the community that I developed in these posts responded pretty much the way that I thought they were: incredibly supportive, very much, don't feel guilty, you tried, But then a number of very, Facebook-y pointed rebukes. There was one woman who said, well, a small friend pod that you keep talking about that your kids had is really an oxymoron, which is completely correct. And another guy said, when you say mostly bubbled, you actually mean completely unbubbled, which is actually also completely correct. And then this one old guy who said a couple of very funny things over the months said, Doc, you just got to follow the Rona rules. and so it turns out that my community taught me while I was trying to teach them. And I had an opportunity to write about my experience in the Globe and as more life lessons to a wider reach. And I ended up incorporating a bunch of the words that people had said to me, pretty much verbatim. Now it's my own wisdom, but it was actually the wisdom of my community. So I think if there's one thing that we've learned from this whole experience, all of us, the pandemic and our community, our culture, is how completely critical community is to us as humans and humanity. And it doesn't really matter what kind of community, the scientific community, the Facebook community, our church or town community, our neighborhood community, our fugitive storytelling community, all of them are really what stands between us and Eleanor Rigby. I think that's turned out to be my biggest life lesson. So thank you very much for this chance.
Thank you, and I thank you very personally for being my guide. And I am actually driving to New York tomorrow to pick up my son, who has been isolating for 10 days and just got his second COVID test back. So I'm feeling okay about it. I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. I especially thank the tellers for the effort that they put into bringing their true life stories to us. And especially, I'm going to give a special shout out to Nick and Sam, who are very well versed in public speaking, but have never done this exact thing before. And I think they both did a fabulous job. So I want to turn it over. I hope you had a good time tonight. And I'm going to turn it back over to the hostess with the mostest, Kate James.
Am I unmuted? Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. What a lovely evening. I couldn't have spent it in better company. It's lovely to be with everybody virtually. I can't wait to see you and hug you. And when that vaccine comes, I'm going to be the first in line. Concord Art would never be the same without all of you. And we appreciate and cherish our relationship with you. And thank you for helping us create the community that we are. I miss spending time with you. And I thank you, storytellers, David, tonight's sponsors, and especially the audience. On behalf of the staff at Concord Art and our board of directors, I'd like to wish you all a very peaceful and art-filled holiday. Thank you and good night. And we have a little slideshow you can watch while you're getting off. Thank you so much for coming. Good night.
Great. Thanks for coming, everyone.